In this lesson, we will learn how to record and modify keyframes on the timeline ruler. What we'll do in this lesson is create an idle for our aircraft, and then the following lesson I'll show you how to have that cycle infinitely or for however long we'd like. So let's go ahead and get started by first doing a little bit of cleanup work. What I'd like to do is just go ahead and hide our fueling line. We can do so from our layers manager. And if you see any joints, you might go to filters and make sure that this is unchecked. So as of right now, I had it unchecked, but you can see that we can see this entire joint system here that we've created in the previous section when rigging the fueling line. But for right now, we don't need to see that. So I'll make sure that that is unchecked. Again, joints under the filter menu. Now, as far as our landing gear goes, let's go ahead and select our main animation control, Anim PVTOL. And with that selected, we'll move over to our attributes manager, and we're going to go ahead and bring up the landing gear. Since the ship is going to be idling, we don't want the landing gear interfering at all. So I'll go ahead and scroll down until we find expand collapse, and let's go ahead and just right click on our slider to set it to 0, and you'll see the landing gear now closes. Alright, great. So we're now ready to start bringing our aircraft to life. So there are a few rules I like to keep in mind when animating, and they're as follows. You'd first want to go to the time that you'd like to set a pose to record animation on. At that point, you'd change your object, so you change your pose, and then you can go in and save that pose by recording a keyframe. So it's just a standard I like to stick to because it works. Alright, so let's say we go ahead and get started then. Let's say if we wanted this to be the lowest position of our cycle, what we could do is go ahead and save this pose or save the state of our ship. We'll head over to our animation palette. We'll make sure that we can record a keyframe on every track except for scale. We don't need to animate scale at all, so we'll go ahead and uncheck that. And that means we have less keyframes to edit when it comes time to polish the animation. Alright, so everything else is good to go. We'll now choose record, and you can see that now our channels have been highlighted with a red color, so they've been filled in with red. This simply means that we have a keyframe recorded on the current frame that we're working with. Now, if we were to go ahead and leave that frame, you can see now we have this red border around our channels. This just lets us know that we have an animated track. However, we're currently not on the frame that the keyframe exists on. Now, if we were to change a value, let's say we bring up our ship, you'll notice that now we have this yellow border. This just lets us know that the value has changed, but the keyframe has not been saved on the current time. If we ever have a yellow circle, that just lets us know that a keyframe exists on the current frame, however the value has changed. So just to show you this, let's go ahead and quickly create another keyframe on frame 6 of our position Y here. I'll just go ahead and hold down Control and left click. So you can see the keyframe has been saved. As we start to scrub through, you can see our ship starts to lift up. Watch what happens when we start to change that value. Again, you can see that now we have a yellow circle, just letting us know the value has changed. The keyframe has not been saved, but there is a keyframe on this current frame. So that's how the color coding system works. Very helpful. But we don't need this key on frame 6. So what I'll do is go ahead and just remove it. We'll right click and choose delete. Another way to do this, if I were to use Control Z to undo back, to bring back the keyframe, let's select our animation control. Another way to remove animation is to simply hold down Control Shift and then click on the channel we'd like to remove it from. You can see that it's going to remove the animation entirely from that channel. So we need to be very careful when using this. If we want to kind of clean out all of our animation data, we can work with Control Shift, and again, we just go ahead and click on either that channel, or we can highlight a full group, hold down Control Shift, and remove animation that way. So I'll just go ahead and undo that back. And again, we do not need the keyframe on 6, so I'll simply right click and choose delete. And next we need to decide when our cycle will end. So normally, if we're starting on frame 0, I'd like to stick with even numbers. We'll have the cycle end on frame 60, and that gives us a very clean midpoint for a seamless animation. So our midpoint then would be frame 30. So let's say we go ahead and go to frame 30, and we will lift our ship up in the y-axis. I'll just go ahead and do that from the Move tool, hitting the E key. We'll just go ahead and just translate the ship up just slightly. We don't want much movement, because remember, this is an idle. So after we've translated the aircraft up, we can go ahead and select our animation control. And let's go ahead and make sure we have a keyframe saved now on 30. We'll hold down Control and a left click on our position Y. If we do it this way, that allows us to animate with a very clean practice, because only this channel, only the channel that we've animated will receive animation and nothing more. If we start to add keyframes on channels that should not receive animation, well then we'll start to clutter our scene with keyframes, and when it comes time to edit the animation in Cinema 4D's F-Curve Manager, that can become a very tedious task. So we're just adding keyframes to the channels we need. Now when it comes to our start and end times, it's a good idea to lock down every channel. That way we can make sure that the animation will loop seamlessly without worrying about accidentally forgetting about animating on a particular track. Alright, so we have the aircraft lifting up. Now let me go ahead and show you a really cool technique we can use with our time slider. So you can see that when we start to scrub with the left mouse button, of course, we're able to see what happens through time. But notice what happens when we hold down Alt and scrub. The animation does not move. So this is a great tool to use when we're trying to animate a moving hold. Or essentially we can use this to quickly copy and paste keyframes. We'll take a look at another way we can do that a little bit later on in this series. What we'll do here is use this to take the value on frame 0 and apply that to frame 60. So I'll simply left click and drag to frame 0. I'll hold down Alt and now left click and drag to frame 60, and let's now go ahead and record another keyframe to lock down this pose. So now you can see that our ship moves up on frame 30 and then back down on frame 60. Very exciting. Now we need the same pose on 0 and 60, our start and end time of the cycle, in order to animate a seamless cycle. We need to make sure that there will be no change. That's one technique for doing that. If there is a change, we'll notice a pop when we start to repeat or loop this animation in the next lesson. Alright, so let's go ahead and adjust our playback maximum time. I'm going to go ahead and set this to frame 60, our range, and we'll go ahead and just play the animation back just to take a look at our loop. You may notice that there is just a slight pause when we go from 60 back to 0. And that's simply because in order to view a seamless animation without actually looping the animation in the F-Curve Manager, we'd simply knock off our last frame. So instead of viewing from 0 to 60, we'd view from 0 to 59. So I'll set 59 as the playback maximum time, while still keeping our actual maximum time at 60. So now when we hit play, we should notice a very nice seamless cycle. Alright, before we end this lesson, let's say we go ahead and add a little bit more movement. So we'll just go ahead and add some rotation in the bank axis just to make this look more natural. We'll go to frame 15, and now we can go to our bank axis, and let's start to go ahead and rotate that, let's say down, and we'll have it tilt to our left. So I'll put in a value of about -3, and again we'll hold down Control and click on that channel to save this keyframe here so it gets recorded. Now to have this move in the opposite direction and to make this look seamless, all we need to do is go to the flipped frame, which would be frame 45, the other midpoint between 30 and 60, and we'll go ahead and put in a value of +3. Now we can go ahead and again hold down Control and left click to save a keyframe here. So once that keyframe has been recorded, watch when we hit play, we should start to notice a pretty nice loop. However, there is a slight pause. This is because of how our animation interpolates. So let's go ahead and stop the lesson here, and in the next lesson we'll learn how to remove this pause and also how to seamlessly loop this animation.